Hello, today we're working on multiplying decimals. We'll also be working on estimating products when we multiply two decimals. Now, before we start, this is just a review. When you are thinking about decimals, what are we really talking about here? Let's say that we have 5 times 1/10. What we're talking about when we're saying 5 times 1/10 is that we have 5 of these 1/10 sections. 1 out of 10 equal sections that make up the whole. So with that in mind, let's just do a slightly more complicated one. Here's 5 times 1/10, and of course that would be 5/10. Now, the more complicated one, I can't really use a grid on because it would require a whole lot of grid use. But let's think about what we would have if we had 236 times 1/10. We would have 236 of these shaded in. Now you can see I only have 10 tenths here in one whole. To get 236 of these, I would actually need to have 23 whole squares and then another square, another grid where I could shade in the 6/10. That's 236 tenths, otherwise known as 23 6/10. Now, this is important to keep in mind because when we start multiplying the decimals, we're going to be placing decimals, and we need to understand that we really have a certain number of tenths or hundredths, and that is why okay, so now let's take a look at some of the problems on today's practice page. And you can stop right now and print out the practice page that is attached if you would like, or you can just copy down the problems as we're doing them and work them with us. Problem number 1, and this is on classwork 1, is 706 and 5/10 times 4 and 6/10. Now, before we actually find the exact product, we are going to estimate. The estimate will help us to know if our answer is reasonable, and it's also going to help us to place the decimal point when we are all finished doing our multiplication. So when you're estimating, you want to make the numbers that you round to easy to work with, yet still fairly close to the original. Generally speaking, it works to round to the largest place value column. So on 706, I'm going to be rounding to the nearest hundred. On 4 and 6/10, I'm going to be rounding to the nearest one. If I round 706 and 5/10 to the nearest hundred, that would be 700. If I round 4 and 6/10 to the nearest one, that's going to be 5. So here is how I'd find my estimate. I do 700 times 5, and that's very easy to work with. 7 times 5, our basic math fact, is 35. And then it was 7 hundredths times 5, so now I have 35 hundredths. I'm putting those 2 zeros that I see over here in this first factor. I'm putting those to the right. Okay, so I'm expecting my product should be somewhere around 3,500. Now, when I actually go to do my product, I'm going to scroll this up a little bit, I'm going to write my factors vertically. So here are those same factors again. 706 and 5/10 times 4 and 6/10. Take a moment to copy that down if you haven't already. Now, if you're looking at the worksheet, Classwork 1, you will see that they've done something a little interesting when they recopied this. What they did was they wrote 7,065 times 1/10. The reason why is because 706 and 5/10 is really 7,065 of those tenths, if you think back to those grids. And then they wrote, that's going to be times 4 and 6/10. So they have 46 times 1/10, because we know 46 times 1/10 is really 4 and 6/10. Now, I personally don't like to do my multiplication the way they've written it, but it is a good way to remind us of what we're really working with here. What we're really working with right here is we have 7,065 of something. There's 7,065 tenths. And right here, we've got 46 of something. There's 46 tenths. So we need to remember that. But for right now, we're just going to do the multiplication as though we were doing the whole numbers. 46 times 7,065. So I'll start in my ones column. 6 times 5, that'd be 30. 0 here, 3 up above. 6 times 6, that's 36 plus 3 more, 39. 6 times 0, 0 plus 3 more, that'd be 3. 6 times 7, that's going to be 42. Now that I have done the 6 times 7,065, I'm going to do the 40 times 7,065 because it's 40 of those tenths. I know I need a 0 in the ones column. All right, 4 of something times 5, that'd be 20. 0 here, 2 up there. 4 times 6, that'd be 24, plus 2 more, that'd be 26. 4 times 0, 0 plus 2 more, that'd be 2. And then 4 times 7, that's going to be 28. And then, of course, when I have my partial products, I'm going to add those up. Oops, sorry about that line. 0 plus 0 is 0. 9 plus 0 is 9. 3 plus 6 is 9. 2 plus 2 is 4. 4 plus 8 is 12. And 2 plus 1 is 3. Okay, now, that's a lot of multiplication, but I am not done yet. Remember that I really was multiplying 7,065 tenths times 46 tenths. And if you think about what happens when you multiply 1/10 times 1/10, you know you would get 100. So if we are multiplying a certain number of tenths times a certain number of tenths, we should be getting a certain number of hundredths. In fact, we should be getting 324,990 times 100. That means I need to place my decimal in my product so that I'm showing I have a certain number of hundredths. My last digit here in my product, that needs to end in the hundredths column. Here is where I place my decimal So that last digit ends in the hundredths column. Now, there are two checks you can do to make sure that you placed your decimal appropriately. The first check is that you should be able to look at your estimate and you should see that your exact product is in the ballpark of your estimate. So our estimate for this was 3,500. And if you look here, yep, okay, 3,249 and 90 hundredths. That's in the ballpark. That looks good. Okay. Now, the second check you can do is if you look at the factors that you started with, and you start at the decimal point in each factor and count the number of digits to the right. So I have one digit to the right of this decimal point here. I have one digit to the right of this decimal point here. That makes a total of 2 digits to the right of the decimal point. Well, in your product, you should have 2 digits to the right of the decimal point. Here we have it, 1, 2. Yep, we got it. Now, you might be looking at that 0 and then going, okay, I could write this like 3,249 and 9/10, and that would be a more conventional way to write it. You totally can do that after you've placed the decimal. You can drop any 0 on the right-hand side if you would like to, but place the decimal first because we know what we were talking about is we would get a certain number of hundredths. Okay, so your turn here. Let's go ahead and let's try another problem. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to estimate. So we are looking at problem number 2 if you're following along on classwork 1, if you've copied that out. And problem number 2 is 6 and 29 hundredths times 6 and 4/10. Now, we're going to estimate first. So I'm going to have you take a moment to think about what would you round 6 and 29 hundredths to? Remember, we want to round to the biggest place value column, the one that's furthest to the left, because we want this to be easy to work with. All right, so I'm hoping you rounded 6 and 29 hundredths to just the whole number 6. All right, now 6 and 4/10. What would you round that to for an estimate? Again, we want to round the biggest place value column to make it easy to work with. What would you round 6 and 4/10 to if you're rounding to the nearest one? All right, I hope you wrote down 6. Now to get our estimate, multiply 6 times 6, and you should get 36. So we are expecting that our exact product for this problem would be about 36. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to do the exact product. So write your problem vertically this time. We have 6 and 29 hundredths times 6 and 4/10. Notice on multiplication, I don't need to line up decimal points like I do on addition and subtraction. I'll just line up with my digits on the far right-hand side, okay, like I did here with the 9 and the 4 stacked above each other, because we're not going to end up adding, we're going to be multiplying. Now, just a little reminder, what are we dealing with here? We are dealing with 6 and 29 hundredths. That is the same as 629 times 100. What are we dealing with our second factor? That's right, 6 and 4/10, which would be the same as 64 times 1/10. So with that in mind, what you're going to do right now is just multiply 64 times 629. Find your product. And then we'll talk about placing that decimal. All right, so pause for a moment, find your product, and then continue on. Okay, if you did the multiplication correctly, here's what it would look like. 4 times 9, 36. 4 times 2 would be 8, plus 3 more would be 11. 4 times 6 would be 24, plus 1 more would be 25. Now I'm going to do the 60, remember 60 of something, times 629 of something. So I need a 0 in the ones column. 6 times 9 is 54. 4 here, 5 up above. 6 times 2 is 12, plus 5 more would be 17. 7 here, 1 up above. 6 times 6 is 36, plus 1 more would be 37. Now, if you happen to have something different, go ahead and quickly change that so you have the correct partial products. Let's add them up and get our total product. 6 plus 0 is 6. 1 plus 4 is 5. 5 plus 7 would be 12. 1 plus 2 plus 7 is going to be 10. So 0 here, 1 up above. 3 plus 1 is 4. All right, now, that's a lot of multiplication. But remember, we are not done yet. We are working with decimals. So let's think about what's really going on here. If I have a certain number of hundredths times a certain number of tenths, what would I get? So think about, what would you get when you multiply a certain number of hundredths times a certain number of tenths? That's right. Of course, we would be getting a certain number of thousandths. That means that the last digit here on our product, that has to end in the thousandths column. So take a moment to place your decimal so that the last digit of this product ends in the thousandths column. Where would that decimal go? If you put the decimal between the 0 and the 2, you are correct. Notice by putting the decimal point there, I have 40 and 256 thousandths as my product. And that makes sense because I would have a certain number of thousandths when I multiply some hundredths times some tenths. Now, remember, there are 2 ways to check and make sure you've got that decimal in the right spot. One way is to think back to your estimate. We estimated this product would be about 36. We've got 40 and 256,000, so a little bit more than 40. That's in the ballpark of 36. Okay, so that looks good. The other way to check is to look at your original factors and count how many digits are to the right of the decimal point. So here's my decimal point right here in 6 and 29 hundredths. I've got 1, 2 digits to the right of the decimal point in this factor. For 6 and 4 tenths, I have 1 digit to the right of the decimal point. So I have a total of 3 digits to the right of the decimal point in my factors here. That means I should have a total of 3 digits to the right of the decimal point in my product. Let's look. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Okay, now let's try another one. And this time I'm going to have you do your estimating totally on your own and then check back in. And then I'm going to have you find the exact product totally on your own and then check back in. Okay, so we are working on number 3 on classwork 1, and number 3 is 70 and 8 tenths times 7 and 2 tenths. Go ahead and get your estimate. Make sure you pause. And then when you've got your estimate, continue the video. Okay, check and see if you have the same thing. I rounded 70 and 8/10 to just 70. I rounded 7 and 2/10 to just 7. And then when I multiply 70 times 7, I would get 490. So my estimate is that my product should be around 490. All right, now go ahead and find the exact product and place your decimal. When you've got your answer, go ahead and start up the video again. Okay, so for 70 and 8/10 times 7 and 2/10, 2 times 8 is 16. 2 times 0 is 0 plus 1 is 1. 2 times 7 is 14. And now I need a 0 in my ones column. 7 times 8 is 56. 7 times 0 is 0, plus 5 would be 5. 7 times 7 would be 49. When I add up these partial products, 6 plus 0 is 6. 1 plus 6 is 7. 4 plus 5 is 9. 1 plus 9 is 10. And then 1 plus 4, that'd be 5. Now, I'm not quite done yet. I do have to place my decimal. So remember, we had a certain number of tenths times a certain number of tenths. So if you think about that, when you're doing tenths times tenths, of course, you would get hundredths. We need to place the decimal, so the last digit of our product is in the hundredths column. Here is where the decimal would be placed. You can check and see if you're in the right ballpark by looking up at your estimate. So 490, that's the right ballpark. And you might think, well, that's 19-ish away from the estimate. And that's not the right ballpark. But think about if you placed your decimal anywhere else, it would be much, much farther away. All right, and then the other check, I've got 1 digit to the right of the decimal in the first factor. I've got 1 digit to the right of the decimal in the second factor. That's a total of 2 digits that should be to the right of the decimal. That looks perfect. Okay, next one. On this one, do your estimate, do your exact, and then check. So please, once you copy this down, pause your video, and then do the work, and then check. So we have 9 and 2/10 times 6 and 6/10. Go ahead and get your estimate, and then get your exact. Okay, so 9 and 2/10, that would round to 9. 6 and 6/10, that would round to 7. So I'm expecting my answer to be in the ballpark of 63. For the exact answer, 9 and 2/10 times 6 and 6/10. I'm just going to ignore the decimal and do my multiplication. 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 9 is 54, plus 1 is 55. Put my 0 down here. Clean house there. Okay, 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 9 is 54, plus 1 more would be 55. All right, I'm adding up my partial products. 2, 7 tens, 0, 6,000. Now, I'm not done yet. Remember, I need to place my decimal. So these were tenths times tenths. Okay, if I do tenths times tenths, I would get a certain number of hundredths. So here is where my decimal would be so that the last digit ends in the hundreds column. If you check out the estimate, ooh, that's pretty close in the ballpark. If you want to check the factors, there's one digit to the right of the decimal in the first factor, one digit to the right of the decimal in the second factor, total 2 digits to the right. Okay, and let's go ahead and let's have you do number 5. Okay, so you're finding an estimate for 66 and 91/100 times 7 3/10. Okay, and then once you find your estimate, go ahead and find your exact answer. Be sure to pause first, get all of those things done, and then tune back in. Okay, here's how I did mine. I rounded 66 and 91/100 to 70. I rounded 7 3/10 to 7. And my estimate's 490. For my exact answer, 66 and 91/100 times 7 3/10. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 9 is 27. 3 times 6 is 18, 19, 20. 3 times 6 is 18 plus 2 more is 20. And then I need a 0 here. I'm going to clean house up here. And let's see, 7 times 1 is 7. 7 times 9 is 63. 7 times 6 is 42, plus 1 more is 43. 7 times 6 is 42, plus 4 more would be 46. And when I add up my partial products, I get 314. So I'm putting the 1 up above in the hundreds column. 3 plus 1 is 4. 0 plus 3 is 3. 2 plus 6 is 8. 4 plus nothing is 4. And don't forget, we're not done. We have to place the decimal points. So we had a certain number of hundredths here and a certain number of tenths here. And you know, when we do hundredths times tenths, we should get a certain number of thousandths. So I need to place my decimal so that the last digit is in the thousandths column. Here's where my decimal point would go, right between this 3 and this 4. Okay, so tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Yep, that works. Here's my check. It should be in the ballpark of my estimate 490. Yep, 483 and 444. I'm sorry, 443 thousandths is in that ballpark. Here's another check. There are 1, 2 digits to the right of the decimal in the first factor, 1 digit to the right of the decimal in the second factor. So a total of 3 digits to the right of the decimal. Okay, now there is another practice in classwork, but I'm going to have you instead open up the link to the homework one and complete those problems and then put your answers in the form. If your answers are accurate, then you will be ready to move on to the practice on your own tomorrow. If you are missing some problems, then we can meet online tomorrow and do a little practice together. So please be careful and make sure you check your work so that you can show what you know. And if you miss things, then that means you really need more online practice tomorrow. Okay? All right, good luck. And thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.